My name's Michael Taylor, working here for Quest Media Group, owners of Tameside Radio 103.6 FM and the Tameside Reporter newspaper. This is our third hustings that we've done during this general election in different constituencies that are covered by our circulation area. And this is the final one just a few days before polling for the Ashton Underline constituency. Let me just explain a little bit about how things are going to be, how they're going to work. We've got, as you can see, lots of people around with various bits of audio-visual equipment, cameras, all the rest of it. It is being streamed on Facebook Live, where we have a massive audience. We had thousands watching our first hustings that we did in High Peak, didn't we? This fella in the front's laughing. We had thousands watching in High Peak. This is how people engage, and I'll be getting any questions that we've got that come direct from Facebook Live. My colleagues will be passing them to me just so we can keep the debate relevant. It's great that we've got a live audience here that we'll be interacting with. It's great too that so many of you have submitted questions, and I've checked off who's got them here. And just to make sure that we cover all the bases and all the important questions in this election, we'll be taking audience questions, but we've also got a few local issues that I think are really important to air, that are very relevant, because this is, after all, a local hustings. So, what I'm going to propose to do, first of all, is I'm going to take an opening statement from each of the candidates for 2 minutes, and I will be monitoring the time on this one, particularly you, Julian. The other thing I ought to point out as well is this is Julian Newton. He's here representing the Brexit Party. Unfortunately, due to a family emergency, Derek Brocklehurst, the Brexit Party candidate for Ashton Underline, isn't able to be here tonight, but his colleague Julian Newton has stood in his stead. So each of the candidates will have 2 minutes. They will introduce themselves. I'll introduce them first of all. And they are, of course, Julian Newton, as I said, from the Brexit Party, Dan Costello from the Conservatives, wearing the blue rosette, Lee Huntbach, councillor in the Waterloo ward here in Ashton Underline, representing the Green Party, defending this seat, Angela Rayner from the Labour Party, and right on the end there, George Rice with his yellow rosette from the Liberal Democrats. So first of all, I'm going to ask them to, with an opening statement of 2 minutes that I will be keeping a close eye on. And to kick us off, please, Julian Newton from the Brexit Party.
Hi, good evening. Yeah, I'm here today deputising for Derek, who does apologise for his absence today for family reasons. He's had to take a family member down to London to be treated for health issues because he can't get the treatment up here in the north, which is not a great thing, but I was happy to deputise on his behalf. My background is in engineering. I'm passionate about engineering, and I see the problems in our society are a result of essentially our slow lane economy. It's a zombie situation, and we need a boost. And we need to bring back, in my view, manufacturing and engineering to the UK, and certainly in the north. And there are lots of potential for us to do that, insofar as we go towards a zero green economy. Now, it's a bottom-up approach, because we think if you've got engineers back there, you're going to get very good jobs, skills base will be increased, and the consequence of that will be wage increases. And if people have got good jobs and a purpose in life, they have a reason to get up, and therefore an improvement in mental health will result, and a much happier society. Now, the issues in this region are particularly intense, because there are lots of homeless people on the streets, and the Brexit Party want to eradicate homelessness. And we think if we can build the economy from the bottom up, we can achieve that. And then on to the NHS as well. The NHS, there are people standing in the party who are from the coalface. That's people who've worked in the NHS all their lives, who are quite happy to take a pay cut to become an MP, so they can be dealing with the issues, and those people who know something about the issues in the NHS. And that's essentially it for me.
Thank you very much, Julian. Right on time. Okay, next. Give me a round of applause. Thank you. Dan Costello from the Conservative Party.
Thank you, and good evening, everybody. As a local candidate, I've been lucky enough to speak to thousands of you across Ashton, Droylsden and Failsworth, both during this campaign and previously through campaigning and working on local issues all year round. And I get the same message wherever I go. People are desperate for change around here. Now, the only way to get change here is to vote Conservative. All of the polls have us quite a close second, close enough to catch Labour with enough support, and the other parties, unfortunately, are nowhere near. Even some of the national newspapers this weekend said that a vote here for the Conservatives can help us unseat Labour and get Brexit done. Now, on the issue of Brexit, I know that some might be tempted to vote for the Brexit Party, but we've been here before. In 2015, about 20% of people here voted for UKIP and didn't really achieve much. They still couldn't beat the Conservative Party, but what they did do was make the Labour lead bigger and safer. So let's not let that happen again. If you truly want to get Brexit done, vote Conservative. We've got a Brexit deal ready to go, oven ready, as Boris keeps reminding us. We'll be out of the European Union just 52 days from today if we get a majority. And then we'll get on with our exciting agenda. Record investment in the NHS, 20,000 new police officers on our streets, and a high-quality education for every child. Take this opportunity to really get change around here. Even if you're just lending us your vote this time round, vote for your local Conservative candidate. Thank you.
Lee Huntbach from the Green Party.
Hello. Since becoming a Green Party councillor in May, alongside many others, it's become clear from the groundswell of support that I've received that people do want change. The next 5 years is going to be vital in the battle against climate breakdown. We should be working together, prioritising a future for our children, our grandchildren, rather than indulging in this tribal and politically motivated arguments regarding EU membership. Now, Brexit, important though it is, has been a time-consuming and painful distraction from what's the greatest ever threat to humanity. Now, other parties are suddenly desperate to greenwash their manifestos, whilst at the same time supporting airport expansion, extensive road building and HS2. Now, all of these are going to increase carbon output while ripping up ancient woodlands that are vital for carbon capture, storage and for clean air and recreation. The Green Party have been developing the Green New Deal for over 10 years. With the originators and with the experts, the continued development of value green space has to stop. Localised flooding is increased as green space is developed, while areas of recreation, exercise and safe play for children is lost. There are more than 1 million empty homes in Britain, 1.5 million sites that are suitable for homes on brownfield land. Premises are being converted to homes that aren't included in the official figures. Now, I've campaigned locally against green space development, and I'll continue to do so. We don't need to build on green space. This is a time to vote green and make this a climate election. Thank you.
Angela Rayner from the Labour Party.
Thank you. And first of all, let me say it's been an absolute privilege to represent Ashton Underline since 2015. I live here. My granddaughter was born at the local hospital here. My children go to school here. And this is where I call home. And I've seen over the last few years, since the coalition government and the Conservatives have took power, the devastating impact that's had on our area. And whilst I've been the MP, I have fought tooth and nail against some of those cuts and pushed the government. And I'm proud of my record in doing that. But the one thing that we are clear of in this general election is we are at a crossroads. As the IFS have said, under the Conservatives we'll have baked in austerity, more cuts for people here, more elderly people on the trolleys at Tameside General, more of our schools having to ask begging letters to give our kids the future they deserve, and more of our Sure Start centres and others being lost because local services can't keep up, and our police overstretched. I've been out there, I've witnessed it, I've seen it. Only this week, one of our homeless in Tameside died. And the voluntary sector like the Station Pub and Pauline Town have been doing the work that, quite frankly, we should be doing as a state. We're one of the richest countries. We can do it. We're being told that we have to manage decline. We don't have to have that in Tameside. What we need is a Labour government that's going to invest in our future again, the green technologies of the future, because we do have a climate emergencies. We do need manufacturing back here, but we need wind, solar and all the technologies that will give our kids decent jobs for the future, but also export peace around the world and solving the climate emergency we have. Hopefully together we can continue to do that. Thank you.
And finally, George Rice from the Liberal Democrats.
So this feels like an especially poignant election to me because it's so important to my generation. This isn't just the first general election I've stood in, but it's also the first one I've been able to vote in. The last one I was 17 and 11 months, which I'm still quite bitter about. But anyway, the media have dubbed this the Brexit election, so I'll make my position on that clear. Any vote for me is a vote to make Brexit stop and get on with the issues that matter to us. But I am not a Liberal Democrat because I'm a Remainer. I'm a Remainer because I'm a Liberal Democrat. And being a Liberal Democrat means I believe immigration is a blessing and immigrants should be celebrated. I believe the climate emergency needs desperate action, not just the lip service that politicians are currently paying it. I believe that mental health should be treated with exactly the same urgency as physical health. And I believe that our system of electing MPs is broken, and it means that some people's voices matter more than others.
Thank you. Well, you had another minute there if you wanted, George, but there you go. Let's crack on with the questions. I'm going to take a few from the audience, first of all. I'd like the candidates to answer them as quickly as possible. You don't necessarily have a 2-minute spiel that you have to reel off in answer to every question. If you think you can answer it in a quick way, then brilliant. I'll take you in the order that you're sat on the panel, and starting with Dan Costello from the Conservatives first. But I'm going to take a question from the audience from Ian Shankland. And Ian, could you make yourself known to us? We'll get a microphone to you, so everyone on Facebook, you'll get it as well, of course, yeah. Ian, what's your question for the panel?
Good evening. Considering homelessness has doubled in the last 9 years, rents have gone through the roof. Some accommodation that people are renting are not fit for purpose. I'd like to hear the plans of each party, how you're going to achieve enough affordable, zero-carbon homes in the shortest possible time. Thank you.
Okay, Ian, can I just add a caveat to the question as well, if you could all build it into your answers? And this is one that we've got from different comments that people have given to us at the newspaper. Is that the Greenbelt issue is a big, important one as well. So it's how do you answer those two great conundrums that are really important to people? Yes, to build more homes, but not to do that at the expense of Greenbelt. And what are your thoughts, each of you as candidates, on the Greater Manchester Spatial Framework and what that would do to either protect or threaten the green spaces that we have here in Ashton? And I'll start there with you, Dan.
Yeah, thanks. And thanks, Ian, for the question. First of all, if you look at the Conservative manifesto, we're committing to building 1 million new homes. But coming back onto the issue of green space, our priority locally, and the local Conservatives have fought for this for some time, is to make sure brownfield sites are prioritised. So protect the greenfields, make sure we prioritise brownfield sites for new house building. One of the other things that I think is important, particularly when you talk about homelessness, is the ending of no-fault evictions. For me, it's very unfair that people can be evicted for no fault of their own at very little notice. And I think that's a very big contributor to the homelessness crisis. We're going to end no-fault evictions. That's very clear in our manifesto, and I think that will help give people more secure and sort of certain accommodation.
Okay, Lee Huntbach.
Well, I think I answered part of this in my opening statement. As a party in our manifesto, we're committed to building 100,000 council houses per year, and these will have 90%. We'll use 90% less energy because they'll be built to passive house standards. We're also going to empower councils to bring empty homes into use. So people who are sitting on houses just in order to make a profit will no longer be able to do that automatically. And I think we need an end to austerity. We need people to be able to afford to get on the market. We have the universal basic income, which everyone will get, which means that you can afford at least to house yourself and feed yourself. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much, Lee. Angela Rayner.
Ian, I think it's an important question, and 2 people in the UK today will die as homeless people. 2 people a day die homeless at the moment, and homelessness has become a real significant issue here, and I commend the Mayor of Greater Manchester, who's been doing a tremendous job in trying to stop that from happening with a bed for a night, and I know that our local councils have been trying to do that. But the government's austerity agenda, the problems we've had because we haven't had social housing being built, the substandard accommodation we have here means that many people are left homeless. 135,000 children will be at Christmas in temporary accommodation. They will not have a home of their own, and it's a scourge on our society. We will build council houses. We will build 100,000 a year. My National Education Service, as your Shadow Education Secretary, hoping to be your Education Secretary, will invest in the skills for the UK economy to make sure people can do that. We will have rent caps. We'll have a 3-year fixed tenancy for people, minimum fixed tenancy, so people can be secure, because a lot of people in private rented at the moment. We will retrofit our houses around here so that they are carbon neutral, and we'll also make sure that the new homes are. We'll make sure our schools and public buildings are as well, and we'll protect the green belt, because at the moment with the government's policy, it means that a lot of the time they're having, as part of the Greater Manchester Spatial Framework, put loads of land up available, and the developers want to use the land that they see as easy to develop, which is not brownfield. So they want to grab that land. What we want to do is force, by making sure the money's available, to force the brownfield sites to be used, so our green belt is protected as part of that. And Woodhouses and Hurst are 2 areas that have been identified here, and I've literally, and in Waterloo, stood there to make sure that our green spaces are protected as a local MP, and I'll continue to do that. But with having a Labour government, I'll be in a much better position to be able to do that, to protect our areas here locally.
Okay, thank you. George Rice.
So I'll start with our manifesto commitments, and that's to build 3 million new homes, 1 million of which will be social housing. With regards to the spatial framework, I think it isn't fit for purpose because it seems to be building houses, frankly, where they're not needed. So building houses where they're not needed in greenfield areas where they could be building on brown belt areas where they are needed, such as the city centre of Manchester. Another point of our manifesto is that we'll be increasing council tax for second homes. And my own personal point is I think that councils aren't currently making enough use of Section 106 money. So Section 106 is where councils can claim contributions from developers in order to build affordable housing. And I think currently it's not a necessity that councils have to claim that. I think that law needs to change so that every developer is contributing to Section 106.
Okay, thank you very much. Did that answer your question?
No.
Oh, sorry, you as well. As if I could forget you. Yeah, sorry.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, as far as the Brexit Party are concerned, it goes back to let's turbocharge this economy. Let's invest in manufacturing. Let's create projects, especially transport projects, which will boost the economy and create wealth for all across the broad range, and hopefully that wealth will create greater taxes so we can invest in our housing accommodation for the poorer people of our society. And we want to eradicate homelessness. It's got to be done. I've met people out there, and you know what? What amazed me is just how intelligent they are insofar as they've had a great education, and yet they're out there on the streets because the circumstances are completely outside of their control. So we need to help and assist them to get back into work with giving them good jobs to get back into.
Okay. Sorry about forgetting you, but who could forget you with an answer like that? Thank you very much. Very good. Thank you. Very polite audience. Ian, how did you think they answered your question?
Well, some of them were a bit lacking in detail. It's okay to say, I'm going to build 1 million houses. I was really after a strategic plan of how you're going to achieve it.
I did only give them 2 minutes, to be fair. Yeah.
But it's going to be a big task. It's going to need an awful lot of training, an awful lot of investment.
Okay. Well, thank you for raising the question. It's clearly a really important one here in Tameside. Okay. Next question, another local one. I'm going to come to Michael Smith. Michael, could you let us know? Right here in the front row, Emma. Thank you very much. Michael, you can remember what your question is, can't you?
Yes, I can remember
Very
what the
good.
question was.
Okay.
Not word for word, but I'll give it a good try. My question was around a very local issue, which is around what I regard as the decaying and neglected town centre of Ashton-under-Lyne. I do believe that Ashton-under-Lyne is almost unique in the lack of investment it's received in the northwest. Areas such as Bolton, Bury, Oldham, even parts of Rochdale have received significant investment over the last few years. And I think I'm probably right in saying all of those are Labour-controlled local authorities. We have a Labour-controlled local authority in Ashton-under-Lyne or in Tameside, and there is zero investment in the town centre. We have a substantial amount of money has been invested in what I would regard as a vanity project for the new council offices and its surrounding area, but nothing at all for the local people of Ashton-under-Lyne. What are the candidates going to do to ensure that balance of inequality of public money against the electorate is satisfied and is readdressed?
Okay. And it's the first stab at this question is Lee Huntbach from the Green Party. Lee, you're a councillor in Tameside as well now, of course.
I am, yeah, recently elected. This is one of the problems that comes up fairly regularly. We have in the Green Party kind of an inbred localism is the word I'm looking for, and I think rather than the supermarkets, out of town supermarkets that people can drive to, I think we need to invest far more in local shops, in local businesses generally. Ashton-under-Lyne always used to be the place that people would come to. I was brought up in my early years in Clayton, and a trip to the shops or a shopping trip would be Ashton. So you'd have the Ashton outdoor market, the indoor market, and then the shops, and they were thriving until fairly recently. And I think that's partly to do with mistakes that have been made by the running of the council, but I think also the general strategy of having large supermarkets on the outskirts. You know, you've got an Asda where you can park and presumably to walk into Ashton, which doesn't happen. They're open 24 hours a day, and I think the local businesses need more support. I think the rates need looking at when you've got the large supermarkets that completely get away with corporation tax, and yet local businesses are what I feel competing on far more difficult terms.
Okay, Angela Rayner.
Thank you for your question, Michael. And to be honest, there's two town centres in Ashton-under-Lyne. There's Ashton Town Centre and there's Droylsden Town Centre. And across Tameside, if I'm really honest, and it's probably the same for Failsworth if I talk about my Oldham side as well, everyone thinks the other people get the most. So whenever something happens in Tameside, in Andrew Gwynn's patch in Denton, they say, well, why is the Lantern Parade in Denton and not in Ashton this year? And the truth is the council's had 7% of its budget cut. So the High Street has been in decline, and the banks were nationalised, and yet the banks have not been compelled by the government to stay on the high street. So the most vulnerable have lost the services. Our bus services, for example, have been fighting really hard to try and keep the bus services going as well, which has had a dramatic impact. Business rates in Ashton-under-Lyne across the board, you can't raise as much from business rates in here as you can in some more affluent areas. So if you're relying on just business rates for this area, it's never going to give you enough. And a lot of people, 7.5 million in the UK, get below £10 an hour. So our £10 an hour minimum wage for people will put money in pocket so they can spend it. Now, we have invested. We've got Tameside College, the new campus is there. That's about footfall. Yes, we have got a new town centre office block, the council offices. That's about putting people there so that they can put the footfall there. Ashton Market has been revamped. There is more work to be done there. My office is right there in the town centre. I walk to it every single day. So we have got new things put there. We put Tony Down's house in Droylsden, again, trying to use public sector money to try and revamp our area. But you're right, business rates is tackle a problem here, but we need to invest in our small and medium enterprise and not make the multinationals get away with not putting a little bit more in our areas as well. So this is part of our redistribution nationally, is about making those pay a little bit more so we can get the skills, the investment, and through our green industrial revolution, the jobs will come here. I want Ashton Moss developed, for example. I'd love to have a university on it, and I think it would be absolutely fantastic to have the new technical college or something to do with my portfolio as the education secretary to revamp and have the Green Deal for the future, because I think our kids there, rather than seeing them in London doing all the great jobs, I'd like to see them here doing those jobs.
Thank you. George Rice.
I think it comes to a wider issue of that I think more powers need to be devolved from Westminster to local government, because, and I can't believe this needs saying, local communities know what's best for their local communities better than MPs in Westminster do. I also think that we need to encourage a kind of culture of local entrepreneurship and local people opening businesses that benefit local people. So I think that does come to reducing business rates for small businesses and also opening more local investment banks who can support entrepreneurs in opening up local businesses and local job opportunities in the local area.
Okay, thank you very much. Julian.
Thank you. Yes, thank you, Michael. It's so sad to see these decaying town centres, but I think a lot of onuses must go on to the likes of Amazon, and we should sort of change our tax system to represent that. I mean, they are paying very little tax to our government on their operations, and they're at the same time closing our town centres down. And you see the shutters in a lot of the like, for example, in Ashton and in Hyde, and it's rife, and it does need addressing, and I think we should be going in on the likes of Amazon.
Okay, Dan.
So, Michael, I think there are two bits to your question, if that's all right. So the first one is around how we invest in the high street. And we've mentioned business rates a few times across here. So we've cut business rates for small and medium-sized businesses. We've extended that cut for another year. And we've also brought things like cinemas and music venues into that cut to make sure that these smaller businesses can survive. The other thing we're doing is putting £150 million into a community fund so that local groups can be supported to buy up shops or pubs, post offices, things like that, when they're struggling, so that we don't end up with all these boarded up shop fronts along the high street. So we're investing in the high street, and we want our high streets and our town centres to thrive. The second bit of the question is what's different about Ashton and Tameside. And it's very easy, I think, for Labour-controlled councils to talk about cuts. It's very easy. But when you look at the way that Tameside Council manages its money, when we go £1 million over budget on the extension of the Hyde Pool, when we sell the Hartshead School site off for £2 million less than its original valuation and offer, we can identify very clearly £3 million that could have been invested and would have been invested had the council managed its budgets better. So absolutely there have been budget cuts, but there needs to be better accountability and scrutiny of what the council is doing with the money that it does have.
Okay, I'm going to ask my colleagues if we've had any good questions from Facebook Live. If you want to bring them up to me, I can have a quick look at them, just in case any of them are a little bit offensive or a little bit stupid. I'll come to you in a second. Yeah. No problem, Michael. Any questions from Facebook Live? Are you checking it? No? Okay. And I'll also just for clarity's sake, I don't know if any of you saw the young people's question time event last night that Angela Rayner was on. I won't be pressing you on the issue about the nationalisation of the sausage industry. You'll be pleased to.
Because I think I went viral on the sausage nationalisation, if I'm honest. I am slightly worried that is the only thing people are going to remember me for now, is that woman that wants to nationalise sausages or something, which clearly I don't, but...
And what was it? The worst question that you've had all of the campaign? Okay, well, if we're not getting any questions sent to us from Facebook Live, I just want to hear quickly back from Michael on his question around Ashton Town Centre.
Yes, forgive me, but I think one of the things, Angela Rayner, that I would say is I've lived in Tameside for over 20 years, and during that time it's been Labour controlled. I've attended regularly over the past few months the full council meetings, and I've seen nothing at all from any of the Labour councillors about investment. What I do see is the local Labour authority sitting on a reserve, unallocated reserve of £169 million. Now, I would have thought at times of crisis and at times of what you regard as financial cuts, which you will no doubt blame the Conservative Party for imposing, it is time to start using some of the reserves for the benefit of the electorate and the residents, rather than just salting it away for some unforeseen, unknown project which may or may not arise.
Can I respond to that?
I'll give you the opportunity to respond, since it was a direct point.
Exactly.
Thank you.
First of all, the councils don't have unallocated reserves, and it's revenue and capital. You can't use a reserves. Can I not just respond?
Just let her finish her answer, then you can come back. You can come back. Angela, please continue.
So the council has to have a certain amount of reserves. It's accountancy, that's what they have to have. And you can't use reserves for revenue spend because it runs out eventually. You can't do that. And the council have had 70% of its budget cut, 70%. We've got a lot of people in this, in my constituency, that are not getting the personal care they need. They're in trolleys on NE at the moment. My mum's there, I've seen it. It's awful. They need that care. We're spending more money on bins and on social care. We haven't got the money for anything else. The council is here, and the council want to see that investment in our area. And I'm sure many people listening to this programme have seen the state of the area now. They've seen that managed decline and decay over the last 9 years, because we can't invest in our area at the moment because we've had these centralised cuts. But the council is not sitting on a huge amount of reserves, because believe me, they've nothing better than what local council would like to do to hold on to their seats than go around throwing a load of money around. So if they had the money to do it, they'd be throwing that money around and giving it to the kids around here.
All I would say,
I'll give you a few minutes, but we do have to crack on with the next question, if that's
well,
all right.
it's important to get the information accurate and to make sure the information is there in the public domain. I would like to share with you then, Angela Rayner, the Freedom of Information request I received back from the local authority, which indicated on the published accounts of the local authority £169 million of unallocated reserves. I'm happy to send that to you if you provide me with your email address.
Well, my email address, you just Google it, it's there, but I have to keep saying and reminding people out there, 70% cuts. I'm not the council, I'm the Member of Parliament, or was until the election was called. And I challenged the council like I got the free parking in Ashton Town Centre. So I'm not here to defend the council, but I will tell you that they've had 70% cuts. And if they had money that they could allocate to our kids in this area and our elderly people, they would definitely do that.
Okay, let's move on to the next question, everybody. So the next question is from Cecilia Stirk. Cecilia Stirk on the back row there. If you get the microphone to her.
Hi. I am an immigrant in this country. My husband is British, and then I have adopted this country, and I love this country. I love everything about history, even the weather in summer. My parents were immigrants in the country where I was born, and probably my grandparents were immigrants in the countries where my parents were born. But here, because I'm an immigrant, immigrants talk to me, and what I see is sometimes total disdain for the British institutions and everything about it. I know people who doesn't even speak English, living here for 20 years. I've known people from my country who doesn't care about anything but about get their money. This country sometimes, in many communities, only a cash machine. I want to know what you're going to do to ensure fair immigration policies for this country, so this country can be the great country that it is.
Okay, thank you very much for your question, Cecilia. And unless I'm having a massive senior moment, the first response is from Angela Rayner.
Okay, thank you. Ashton-under-Lyne, in particular, Oldham and Tameside, have done well by immigration. That people have come to this country for decades and have done a fantastic job. We used to have English as a second language course. That's been cut. The budget for things like that have been cut. So, but if you go into Tameside General, if you go into Oldham Infirmary, if you go into the council, if you go into any of the services, the police, you'll find people that have come to this country that are doing jobs on our behalf. I think you're right, we do have to have a fair system, but it's not immigrants that are causing the pressures on our GPs, that are causing the pressures on our health service, that are causing the pressures on our council housing at the moment. It's the cuts that we've had to this area. So I won't scapegoat and call my constituents letterboxers like Boris Johnson has when they wear the hijab. I think it's disgusting when people go around dog whistling racism, and that's why I had a go at Nigel Farage last night, because I think it's completely unacceptable to do that. We do have a system in this country. People have always come to this country and worked hard and been paid their taxes and done a fair job and have always contributed to our society. I think it's right we continue to do that. I think it's right we invest in our public services and we don't go around peddling hate. Because in Oldham, 15 years ago, we had the Oldham riots. And I'm not going back there.
Sorry, this is from an anti-Semitic party?
And I'm not going back there because I'm against all forms of racism and anti-Semitism. And I fought against that all my career. I was a regional convener for Unison that used to take people.
No, no, come on, let's have some calm here, please.
So I fought the BNP on the streets as a trade union rep. I've always fought against any form of anti-Semitism and racism and will continue to do so. But what I've seen in terms of the Islamophobia and the attacks on my constituents that I've had to deal with, I will not dog whistle racism, and I will not turn around and say people that have come to our country have not contributed here in Ashton, in Tameside and Oldham, because they have, and that's the fact. It's the cuts that have caused the public services to be in decline, not people coming to this country.
Thank you. George Rice from the Liberal Democrats.
I think, as I said in my opening statement, I've never seen any example of immigrants being in any way a scrounge on society, and they should be celebrated, not demonised. 10% of doctors in the NHS are immigrants, and that is something we should be immensely grateful for. I think we do need a fair immigration system. The current one isn't up to scratch. Frankly, I'd like to make it easier for people to come over here and contribute and enjoy being part of our society. I think my biggest bugbear for immigration is the way that we treat LGBT plus immigrants. There's currently a culture of disbelief. There's currently a culture of, well, is it all right if you go home and you're just discreet about your sexuality? I think we should be encouraging people to come over here and enjoy the freedoms that LGBT plus people have here to be themselves.
I'm not sure I'd agree with
Thank you very much.
I don't feel I have to go home and hide away.
Well, he's not talking about this country. He's talking about immigration. Let's move on to the next point. Julian from the Brexit Party.
Thank you, Cecilia. Yeah, as far as I'm concerned, and the Brexit Party, I mean, it's a wonderful country. It's a multicultural country, and we should embrace immigration. But at the moment, we cannot. The resources that we have got to somehow restrict that immigration. And there is this solution, if you like. Maybe we adopt a point system on immigrants, because there's only so much the country can take. It's like we're a small nation, and we could be even getting smaller if we get this tidal increases and increase in sea levels and erosion of our coastlines. And so we have got to basically plan for the future and work to we've also got to provide jobs for these people as well when they come in. So that's
Okay, Dan Costello from the Conservatives.
Yeah, I might surprise you by starting by agreeing with Angela, which we don't agree on much, but I think what Angela said at the start is absolutely right. We've seen massive benefits of immigration, both in this area and across this country, and immigration is a positive thing. We talk about the NHS. It's not just the NHS. Obviously, it's across lots of industries. I was a human resources manager in the NHS. I've seen the massive, massive contribution that immigrants make to the NHS, and as I say, lots of other industries as well. Cecilia, you asked about what our party is going to do, and I'm not sure that anybody's actually answered your question, so let me answer that question for you. We've committed very clearly to an Australian point style system, and what that will do is make sure that immigrants are very welcome in this country on a skills basis. So the skills that we need are able to come and enjoy this country and to contribute, and I think that's really important, that we continue to make immigration a really positive thing for our society and for our economy.
Okay. Lee from the Green Party.
I think I've not got a lot to add. I'd agree with what Angela and George just said. I think we're the 5th richest country on the planet, and that is largely to do with immigration. We can afford to bring people in to do the work that we need. 4 years ago, I fell seriously ill and ended up with complications. I had to have a heart surgery, and I think out of the 10 people that were in the theatre that saved my life, 8 of them were immigrants. So I'm grateful for that. I'm from the horticulture industry, and I know even now people and farmers are struggling to get the crops in. They will outlook a little bit this year because crops failed because of the weather. So again, we're looking at climate change. But the point system, I just think it's too simplistic. If we need someone to fill a role, we get the best person for it. And I know certainly within the NHS, my daughter's a nurse, we just can't train enough people, British people, to do the work at that level. So we need immigration.
Okay, thank you very much for your points on that question. I'm going to go to Facebook Live for my next question, just to prove that it is interactive. We've had a really good question that some of you have touched on, but I think is really important on mental health, from Lindsay Dunn, and it says, what do the candidates and their parties plan to do to support on mental health? And for the first answer to that question, I'm going to go to George from the Liberal Democrats.
I think it basically bogs down to a very simple point, which is that mental health should be treated the same as physical health. If you break your ankle, you go to the doctor, and I think it should be the same if you're having mental health issues. Somebody spoke to me recently about a 12-month wait they had to see a psychiatrist, and that's just unacceptable in the 5th richest country in the world. I'm personally lucky enough to benefit from counsellors at university, which are open to me. And I think that every school should also have a counsellor, because that's such an important age to be able to talk about your mental health and be open about it. I think a lot of it comes down to funding. There wouldn't be that waiting list if it weren't for cuts. And so I think it's about putting a penny on the pound of income tax which can be ring-fenced for the NHS, which can bring more counsellors into the profession to talk to people about their mental health.
Okay, Julian from the Brexit Party.
Yeah, mental health is a big issue for the Brexit Party, and you know, it's so important that we get people's well-being and mental well-being really good. And it goes back to what I was saying earlier. You know, we've got to basically grow our industries and manufacturing and all the rest of it, so we can get good jobs, so people can have a purpose in life. Because I think that's what causes a lot of mental health at the moment. The jobs out there are not there for giving people a purpose, and that's what I think we need to do. It's a ground-up approach to it.
Okay, Dan Costello.
Yeah, fully agree that this is a massive issue. You've seen massive prioritisation of this from Conservative governments. It was certainly a mission that Theresa May put out there for herself. I agree with what George said. I think having counsellors in universities is a really powerful thing. I would agree that schools would benefit from them as well. And also employers, because a lot of people face mental health issues at work. And I think in the end, the more support mechanisms and frameworks that we can create to allow people to talk about it, give people an outlet, give people a support network, is really how we solve the problem. I think we also have to sort of destigmatise mental health. And I think we're doing really well at that. As a society, we're getting better at it, but we're not there yet. So we have to make sure exactly that mental health is seen on a par with physical health in terms of its impact on people's lives.
Okay, Lee Huntbach.
I think health isn't just the NHS, so we need to look at it more holistically. Now, the universal basic income, if you can give people enough money to be able to survive with the basics, just the basics, then the mental health will be obviously less of an issue. The NHS is clogged up really by poor people, and that's because poor people are the ones that get ill. If you've no money, you're depressed, you can't feed yourself properly, you may be not, and I've been in the position when I was ill, that I wasn't heating the home properly. I had a heart condition, and I was scared to put the heating on. Now, I knew that eventually I would have the operation that would cure me, but my mental ill health was at rock bottom. If I hadn't have known I was going to get that operation, I'd have been suicidal. I know I would. It was only the fact that I knew that I had the operation. I was told I was going to get it. I had to wait. Eventually, it was 17 months, 1 or 2 operations in between that didn't quite work. And how can your mental health not work? Now, I had to suffer the indignity of the health assessments. Now, I'd worked for 36 years non-stop. I was a well-paid teacher with £30,000 salary, and then I suddenly became unemployed because of my health. Almost immediately, I was sent for a health assessment, and I was found to be fully fit for work. Now, I had a serious health condition. My heart, my atrial fibrillation meant I couldn't walk up the stairs without being exhausted. Nobody would have employed me, but I failed. I won the appeal, but it's just such an unfair system, and you're forcing people into mental health. I'm a strong-minded person. I was shocked by the way my health deteriorated, but I'm an example of really the state that we've got into. Yeah. 10 years of a Tory government, yeah. And that's there's your result.
Lee, can I just at this point applaud you for your courage?
Oh, thanks. It's just an illustration of an example.
Yeah, thank you. Angela.
Yeah, thank you. And Lee's absolutely right, and he's not on his own. The chronic problem that we have in terms of services and support for people. So first of all, there's a problem because we've cut a lot of the services, the public services that we had, whether that's through the local authority or through the NHS. Those services have gone now and people are getting into crisis more and more. But more importantly, we want to stop people from being broken in the first place. So that goes right back to our young people as well. So not over-testing them, not making them feel too pressurised in the early days, which is something that I feel quite important about, helping families to stay together, not at crisis point. The poverty that we see, which Lee talked about as well. So making sure we have well-being at the heart of what we do, invest in our public services. So we do have the CAMS service. So we do have this voluntary sector like Mind and others that have had to cut back here in Tameside because they don't have the support that they do. And by having those green spaces as well, you know, Lee talked about that, and it is important about the environment that people live and grow up in, because if you've not got a happy space around near where you live, then that's going to make you feel more unwell. And if you can't afford to feed your children and you can't afford to go out, then that's going to have an impact on your mental well-being. So we've got to start putting well-being at the heart of everything that we do, and that's what I've done with our National Education Service. When people have the means, when we get rid of the horrible universal credit and the sanctioning that's gone on and making people feel devalued and not worthwhile, actually helping people is the best thing we can do. And one of the first things that I found as the Member of Parliament here was within a couple of weeks of me being elected was a sad case of Kane, who was 18, who on his 18th birthday had money put into his account to pay his first rent and his first home. He'd been in the care system here in Tameside, and he hung himself because Wonga was able to take the money out of his account. And I've never forgotten that young lad in all the time that I've been in Parliament, and that's how our young people are feeling at the moment. And if you get a loan or you go to get a mobile phone these days, a contract, they'll send you a letter warning you if you've not paid the bill, and they'll also, these companies will send a letter at the same time saying payday loan, you can get an instant loan, and people are getting into debt. And we've got to crack down on some of these problems and pressures that we're putting on people's lives at the moment, and part of that is making sure that people can get a decent wage, and those that need the support through the benefit system get it as well.
Right, thank you very much. Right, we're because each of you have got a 2-minute closing statement to make. I'm looking towards bringing this to a little bit of an end. We've had a lot of questions that we're not able to get through. We're getting loads more questions from Facebook Live. Hopefully, we can carry on this conversation. But what I'd like to get each of you to do first of all, though, and I want to push you on this one as well, is I think what we witnessed in the last Parliament was a lot of rancour, a lot of contested anger around the very issue of Brexit, that it was an issue that wasn't settled by a referendum in 2016, that the people in this constituency, for instance, voted 60% to leave. I think it's a very live issue here in Ashton and Underline. So what I'd like to get from each of the candidates is what their own personal position is on this, because I don't think it's acceptable just to trot out the party's position, because I think what we saw from the last Parliament was that many MPs completely broke with their party lines on this one. And I know that that Labour have promised a second referendum, Angela, and different members of the Labour front bench have their own positions. So if I could, and I'm going to start again with the Brexit Party, which is a bit of a, as they say on Question of Sport, a home question for you. But Julian Newton from the Brexit Party, your position on Brexit, the big issue of this election?
Well, it's the principle behind, do we have a democracy? That is the thing. Do we have a democracy in this country anymore? Is it being eroded? You know, you go back 3 years, we had a vote, and for people to say, well, the population didn't know what they were voting for, I think that's an insult to the population's intelligence, because we've all got Google, we've all got the mobile phones, the smart technology, and there's so much information that was out there about the history of the EU superstate and how it's developed and all the rest of it. You know, there's 3 presidents of the European Union, and we're one step removed from being able to vote for those people, you know. I like to know that the person I'm voting who's going to lead the country is someone I can vote directly, you know, and this business about democracy now is just, what is democracy?
But I don't see Jeremy Corbyn or Boris Johnson's name on the ballot paper in this country, in our general election.
Well, yes, that's correct. Yeah. That's true. But you know who you're going to be voting for. You're voting for a party, and you're voting for who's going to be the leader of that party.
Okay.
You know? So it's...
Okay. Dan Costello from the Conservatives.
Yeah, I think the issue of democracy is exactly the right one. You know, this country as a whole voted very clearly to leave the European Union, even more clearly in this constituency, as you said. And I think it's an absolute disgrace that 3.5 years on, we've not delivered on the result that we promised to deliver. It's a disgrace that we're having a general election in which 2 of the major parties are standing on referendums to either cancel Brexit altogether or have a second referendum. I have to say it's a disgrace for any MP who stood in 2017 on a manifesto to deliver Brexit. And I'm sorry, Angela, you were one of these MPs who stood on a manifesto to deliver Brexit and have voted against it at every single opportunity in Parliament. It's not good enough. We have a deal that is ready to go. Boris keeps saying oven ready, that I said before. Can I just answer? Thank you. We have a deal that's ready to go. We'll be out 52 days from today. If we get a majority, we'll deliver what people voted for, and then we'll get on with our agenda. We have to get this done now. It's gone on for too long.
Lee Huntbach from the Green Party.
Well, my personal feelings is pretty much the same as our party. What we were promised was undeliverable. What we were promised was a deal that would be as good as the one we had, but we wouldn't have to pay for it. We'd get the benefits of the club without being in the club. It was never going to be easy. We were told it was going to be easy, and it was never going to be done in 3 years. Now the Parliament, the fact that Parliament couldn't agree on a deal just shows you how bad the deals have been. The only way to solve this is democracy. Take it back to the people. People's vote on the final deal, on the withdrawal deal, and then we can decide. Now, people did know what they were voting for. They knew what they wanted. Nobody knew what we were going to get because that hadn't been decided yet. So you put it back to the people. Is this acceptable? That's democracy.
Okay, thank you, Lee. Angela Rayner.
Well, I think this is a really important distinction because for 3.5 years I've been completely frustrated by the Conservatives who have failed to deliver Brexit. That's the truth. Now, Boris Johnson, I can sit here and say this because it's fact. The DUP were given £1 billion to prop up the Conservatives, and even they wouldn't vote for their deal because you've sold Northern Ireland down the road on this particular point. Boris Johnson didn't vote for Theresa May's deal. He blocked it. Boris Johnson had an oven-ready withdrawal agreement, not a deal, a withdrawal agreement, and he withdrew it once it was voted for. Parliament voted for his deal. I didn't because his deal was good, and they did. They voted for his deal. He withdrew that deal because what he wants is 5 years to then he'll know he'll have to go closely aligned to Europe because he has to trade with Europe, 70% of our trade, and he still hasn't said how he's going to solve the Northern Ireland border issue, and unicorns will come up eventually. He said we'd leave by October. We didn't leave by October. He's now saying it's January. We won't. If we even do get that withdrawal agreement passed, you're talking years of trade negotiations. So people are being told that this is about Brexit. It's not about Brexit at all. This is about Margaret Thatcher on amphetamines, deregulation of our market, privatisation of our NHS, and Boris Johnson and his right-wing friends doing away with our hard-fought rights. 21 moderate Tories were purged from the Conservative Party, including Winston Churchill's grandson, because they've gone hard right. And I don't believe the people of Ashton-under-Lyne will fall for that.
So Angela, can you just make clear as well on one issue that I've heard this week is if Labour win the election, there's going to be a second referendum on the deal that is negotiated with Europe, and you would campaign against that?
No, I've said that we would go and get a deal, which we haven't had the opportunity to do yet, which will be closely aligned to Europe because we have to be, because 70% of our trade is there, and we've got to deal with the Northern Ireland border issue. And then we put that deal back to the people, and then the people will decide. That's what I've said will happen. That deal will come out. That deal will come out. It will come out. Because we said right from the start that we have to have a customs union, we have to have a singles market, and we've got to make sure that we deal with the Northern Ireland problem. Okay. We've got to make sure that our trade... There's loads of businesses here in Ashton-under-Lyne who trade and get parts through Europe. If we do not deal with that issue, those businesses will go bust in Ashton-under-Lyne. That's the truth. We have to deal with that issue. Please. It's not scaremongering. It's the fact. George Rice. I've not decided to just ignore my constituents. Believe me, I want the best for them.
George Rice from the Liberal Democrats. George Rice from the Liberal Democrats.
I'll start with the chair's first point about the rancour surrounding the Brexit argument. And can I? Yeah. So I'll start with the first point that the chair made about the rancour surrounding the Brexit argument, and I think that the media are to blame for pitching it as an us against them issue. Many of my family, many of my best friends voted to leave. They still want to leave the EU, and I love them dearly. But I'm not going to win any friends on the panel for saying this, but I was the only candidate here who couldn't vote in the referendum. I was too young. But I still remember waking up that day with just this sense of dread, this sense that we'd turned our back on our closest neighbours, this sense that we were risking peace in Northern Ireland, this sense that we're risking economic crash, which is only going to worsen the problems we see in our society today. For me personally, I think it comes down to the principle that an MP should vote according to what they believe is in the best interest of their constituents, and I believe there is no Brexit deal in the best interest of Ashton-under-Lyne. And because of that, if you elected me as your MP, I'd vote for any measure designed to stop Brexit, and I would campaign for Remain in a second referendum.
Thank you very much. Okay, while you're on your feet, young lad, I'm afraid you're the first to go. I'm going to invite all of the candidates to with a closing summary of their views, why they would want you to vote for them in the general election on Thursday if you haven't already voted. So I'm going to kick off first of all with George Rice from the Liberal Democrats. 2 minutes.
Politics is currently in a stalemate. Parliament is endlessly debating a Brexit deal that is going to harm Ashton-under-Lyne, harm the NHS, and harm our wider society altogether. I think the best way to deal with this is to just stop Brexit completely so we can get on with properly funding our NHS, dealing with our broken voting system, properly funding our schools, and genuinely changing them through radical measures such as abolishing Ofsted and abolishing SAT exams to ensure that pupils and teachers are given the best support they can possibly receive. And that's why I want you to vote for me on Thursday.
Thank you very much. Angela Rayner.
It's been an absolute privilege to represent my hometown, and I would do nothing to harm and not support my constituents here. I absolutely love representing this area. Everything that I've done, I've been a public service. I came into politics because I was a home help and I felt that people needed looking after and support. I've dedicated my life to public service, and everything I've done since I've been the Member of Parliament for here has been about putting the interests of the people here properly and making sure that I look after their interests. There's so much at stake at this general election. We're at a crossroads. We can invest in our people, we can support each other, we can bring our country together, we can be outward looking, we could be global traders and global leaders, or we can have more of the same of 9 years of austerity with the Conservatives. They don't care about what happens in Ashton-under-Lyne. Boris Johnson doesn't care about what happens in Ashton-under-Lyne, but I do. And I hope that you'll put your trust in me on Thursday to continue to fight for our area and support each other.
Thank you very much. Lee Huntbach from the Green Party.
One thing we haven't spoken about tonight is the unfair voting system. Now, we have a first past the post voting system which guarantees that you will vote for the person, not necessarily the person you want to represent you, but against a person that you definitely don't want. So it's a two-horse race. We know that Angela's most probably going to win this seat. So in that case, you need to think it's not a marginal. Now in October 2018, the United Nations International Panel on Climate Change report told us that we had until 2030, at best, is what they said, to avoid runaway climate change. Now, what have we done? Now, the Greens have been warning about this for decades, and we've been preparing workable solutions We've been working on the Green New Deal for over 10 years. Now, the longer we leave the radical action that's needed, it's going to be riskier and costlier to solve. To get zero carbon by 2050, according to the scientists, gives us only a 50% chance of catastrophe. Now, that's a toss of a coin. And when your house is on fire, you deal like it's on fire. You don't order it, you don't book a fire engine for 20 years' time. And the fact is that you can now vote with your head as well as your heart and vote green.
Thank you very much. Dan Costello from the Conservatives.
Yeah, thank you. And firstly, thank you all for your questions. It's been good to engage, even the difficult questions. You've heard a lot tonight from all of the parties on a range of issues, and I hope that's been informative. I hope that I've demonstrated that I'm a credible local candidate who truly cares about this area and cares about this community. As I said at the start, the simple fact of the matter is the only way to get change here is to vote Conservative. And don't just take my word for it. Look at the polls, look at the projections, read the national newspaper articles that say if you vote Conservative here, we can beat Labour for the first time in 85 years. We've got a real chance at this election. A chance to deliver the Brexit that you voted for, and a chance to get change here. So even if you're just lending me your vote this time, even if you've never voted Conservative before in your life, go out on Thursday, grasp the opportunity for change, and elect me, Dan Costello, your local Conservative candidate. Thank you.
And finally, on behalf of the Brexit Party and their candidate Derek Brocklehurst, Julian Newton from the Brexit Party.
Both myself and Derek have grown up in this wonderful region in Longdendale and Tameside, and we're passionate about the issues that are confronting us. But one thing we have to do is to extricate ourselves from the EU shackles. You know, we've got to move on now. The decision has been made, but we cannot go into a negotiating exercise with the EU without some way of getting out. You know, you've got to have an exit door, and that at the moment is not possible because of all the fighting and infighting in our own political system. That's what's breaking it, and you know, there is a great future out there after Brexit. You know, we can now look at the opportunities of the zero carbon world. You know, that we can go zero carbon with our transport infrastructure. The technology is there, it's been there for decades, and we need to buy into that because we were the forefront of it. So we can exploit the opportunities now and build build our industry and reboot the economy as well, and get some decent jobs, manufacturing jobs, engineering jobs, because that's what we need for the future. And hopefully that will bring increased success for the country, and we can go back to being a great nation again. So I hope that you can vote for myself and Derek to bring on change.
Thank you very much. And thank you to all of the candidates tonight. This, of course, has been the third hustings that Quest Media have run, but it's not the last time that we're going to be running any of these sorts of public events. It's something that we want to grow here in Tameside. We want an active community of people coming along, holding their politicians to account, holding their business leaders to account, and making their voice heard through a community newspaper group, which is quite unique. It's an industry that's gone through a lot of turmoil, but fair play to all the team at Quest for keeping an FM radio station and a newspaper going, and all the best of success to all of them. Thanks again to all of the candidates for giving up their time from the campaign trail this evening. And use your vote wisely on Thursday. Thank you very much, and have a great, safe journey home.